Songs to Uncle Scrim by Mervyn Thompson. Mervyn Thompson wrote Songs to Uncle Scrim in the middle of the 1970s. I've picked out here some of the bits of New Zealand history that are relevant to this period from Michael King's Penguin History of New Zealand. First of all, 1972 saw the election of Norman Kirk in the third Labour government, and this was where Norman Kirk made his speech in which he said, "While we preserve the warmest ties and closest sentimental attachments between our country and the United Kingdom, we recognise that we have come of age." So this was a time of a sense in New Zealand of there being an independent spirit and something that New Zealanders could finally talk about their own identity. There was a continuation and an increase in the personal and sexual revolution begun in the 60s. There was certainly a big increase in the number of books published in New Zealand. The art scene was taking off, the New Zealand film industry was flourishing, and the voices of counterculture, Māori and feminism, were being heard quite strongly for perhaps the first time. Dr. Corballis, in a review of this book of Mervyn Thompson's The Selected Plays, which came out in 1986, said, "Māoritanga, feminism, nationalism, Mr. Thompson is indefatigably leading the way in all the areas which matter most in New Zealand drama." Other good things were going on. There was withdrawal of troops from Vietnam, the cancellation of the Springbok tour that was going to happen in 1973. The government had sent a frigate to Mororo to protest against the French nuclear testing there. And then this man arrived on the scene. Now, in 1975, there was a lot of anxiety about financial insecurity in terms of falling wool prices and fluctuating oil prices. England had joined the common market. This man was brought in really on the back of his strength as a strong financier who could balance the budget. Now, this becomes quite an important aspect of Thompson's play, and even though Muldoon was the country at the time seemed to be still economically flourishing, there were signs that alerted Thompson to the possibility that perhaps history was repeating itself. So he makes the link between this period and the depression of the 1930s. New Zealand theatre in the 1970s, there was a possibility of the national theatres growing through the establishment of the professional regional theatres. This was a solution instead of trying to have a national company that toured the country, which just wasn't working. The obvious answer was to set up professional regional theatres. The oldest one was at Downstage in Wellington. The Mercury in Auckland followed, and the Court in Christchurch. A series of other smaller theatres, Gateway in Tauranga, Corporate Centrepoint and Maidment in Auckland, and the Seca Theatre in Wellington, just a few of the flourishing theatres in this period. The Arts Council's professional standards were brought in. One of the effects of that was the development of the Theatre Federation. There was quite a lot of theatre activity that Mervyn Thompson was reacting to in some way. The Baxter Festival of 1973. Harrison's Tomorrow Will Be a Lovely Day. Roger Hall's Glide Time, which came out in 1976, perhaps still one of the most popular plays in the country. And then at the end of the decade, Robert Lord's Well Hung and Greg McGee's Forskin's Lament, which heralded the beginning of that huge flourishing of New Zealand theatre in the 80s, especially Māori and women's theatre. There was what Peter Harcourt called in his book a dramatic appearance. The theatre at this time was more truly representative of the contemporary New Zealand scene. So Mervyn Thompson, brought up on the west coast of the South Island of New Zealand, where he experienced life as a miner and had his first introduction to theatre. He was considered to be perhaps one of New Zealand's most significant playwrights, certainly a very controversial figure. Significant not only for the body of work that he left, but for his work as a director, as a polemicist in support of New Zealand drama and dramatists. He co-founded the Court Theatre, where he directed from 71 to 74, directed at Downstage. He set up his own specialist drama program at Auckland and founded the Auckland Summer Maidment Theatre. This picture is taken from the publicity for the opening of that theatre. Considered by Sebastian Black in the introduction to the selected plays as having the most distinctive theatrical voice in the century over the last decade. Also a controversial figure, he confronted New Zealanders with their own history. He was particularly outspoken in attacking the middle classes, who he accused of spreading the myth of a classless society and using it for their own wealth. In the mid-80s, a lot of controversy surrounded him when he was attacked by some feminists who accused him of sexual molestation. They tied him to a tree and put a label of rapist on him. That's a story outside the seminar, but one very interesting, unpleasant incident. So Thompson's theatre is very much a political theatre, always concerned with identity and national issues. He began his theatre career on the West Coast. He joined the Reefton Drama Club, where they were performing Shaw, Moliere, and Priestley. He describes the culture at the time as being either of Stagland, the macho rugby beer drinking blokes that he went down the mines with and who gave him a hard time for having any interest in theatre, and Blandland, the aspiring middle classes looking to Europe, who denied the possibility of there being any New Zealand theatre, let alone a working class theatre. He left the West Coast to work with Ngaio Marsh. One of the plays he directed was Marit Sade, where he said that he learnt by directing Marit Sade and working with a musical director, that things of importance could be expressed in more compelling and exciting ways than afforded by prosaic dialogue. He always expressed support for oppressed groups, Māori women and the working classes. He attempted to give people back their history, and he writes a lot about the importance of history, and it becomes very important in his plays. Greenwood describes his viewpoint as passionately proletarian and oftenly savagely satiric. And Dr. Corballis in that introduction talks of his intense evocation of the struggle between joy and austerity, creativity and philistinism, life and death. A little piece that Thompson wrote in a paper called Theatre and Working Class Politics, I think is possibly worth quoting in full, or at least a part of the paragraph. He says, we have a history, it is not dull, it is usable. A heightened sense of history in a people brings a heightened sense of power. Give a people back their history, and they may become less inclined to see themselves as useful, fretful sleepers, succumbing to a living death in an irrelevant province far from home. Give people back a history, and they may become increasingly aware that they have been culturally exploited for decades and that they may also be exploiters themselves. We must ask, why did we believe for so long that we had no history? Who robbed us of it? Who wrote that history that did get written, and what did they have to gain by writing it that way? To the latter question, a Māori would reply, bloody Pākehā. Women would answer, bloody men. And I, as a working class New Zealander, might well shout, bloody mannequins of the middle class. Perhaps more than any other New Zealand playwright, Peter Thompson draws on popular forms, especially his popular forms out of the past, and in order to re-examine history. So his work is very stylized. He opposed naturalism, didn't see any point in it. His song plays employ music, lyrics, and gesture in of equal importance with each other, and they're sometimes in harmony, but very often they work in counterpoint to each other, and it's the contrast, the juxtaposition of that counterpoint that brings out a lot of the social messages of his play. He's influenced by Brecht and Kurt Weill and others in this sense, but tend to move away from Brecht's distancing techniques, because he wanted his